warrior from a land that was given a bad hand, and when I examined it, I nearly ran into pure insanity. Cause humanity lost its ways as a result of hate. That's why people have no problem scraping evil from their plate. Shout out to True Res holding it down in 6 nations, and to the crew that producing the 2 wrote newspapers. Keep exposing the truth, man, forget the haters.
There you go. It is July 24th. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, and no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tyendinaga. You can find our audio stream at www.ltnradionet.com. And of course, you can catch our video and audio stream on Facebook Live. We are Facebook Live now as we speak. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I'm joined by Matt Hill on the board.
There you go.
I've got our special guest, Ed Schindler, in studio as well.
Good morning.
And of course, we've got Jake Proud in studio, manning the cameras both for our Facebook live stream and for our YouTube channel, for our Let's Talk Native TV channel, putting our the video of this program on that channel. So you've really got no excuse for missing it, unless you want to. But we stream live on Facebook. We are streaming on the internet. We're simulcast on CKWE. We're also rebroadcast on Netroots Radio.
I think the only thing missing is a written transcript.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we need one of those voice
stenographers.
You know what, here's the problem with that. Do you remember when we were back at KB and you used to, when you watch the audio, it would actually give you a printed out voice recognition? They always kept referring to me as John McCain.
Yep.
I had a real problem with that. Anyway, so look, our studio engineer is Kelly McMillan. I want to thank her for all the fine work that she's done here. Hey, that opening song was "Pain of a Warrior" by Young Jibwe. Haven't heard from Young Jibwe in a while, and he opens that song with Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!, who I share the airways with down in New York on WBAI. Look, it's a funny thing about doing the show. Sometimes we don't have a show planned. We watch the headlines and we look for what's out there and what's going on, and we react to what is current. And in a way, I guess I'm going to do a little of that. I do want to put it out there first so people know. Since we are Facebook streaming, you can comment on our Facebook stream. So if you go to Let's Talk Native with John Kane, the Facebook group page, you can watch the stream, you can hear the audio, and you can offer your comments there. We also have a phone line that's set up through CKWE in Tyendinaga, where people can call in and participate in the conversation. The number is 855-967-0463. I've got it posted here on the Facebook page. We don't get a whole lot of callers. On occasion, somebody will call in, and we appreciate the feedback, and we look for your comments here on Facebook. But here's the thing. We have these memories that show up on Facebook, which are basically a post of something that you posted years ago.
Your personal log of what Facebook has of you.
Yeah, so it could be something, but it's interesting though, and sometimes it'll post either it'll show in my memories something that I posted 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 years ago, and sometimes those things are interesting to look at. What I find, because I lose track of some of things that I've written, I've been writing for quite a while. So when it posts a what they call a note or a file that I've posted, it gives me a chance to review something that I've written. In this case, I'm talking about something that was written in 2011. So that's 6 years ago. And I think I was responding to a question that Matt had raised on the same day about, are you satisfied with the state of the Confederacy? Meaning the Haudenosaunee. And so I offered my response. I'm sure it wasn't the only response, but I posted it as a note. And the thing that that we get into sometimes in a conversation has to do with for lack of a better word, and I'm sure there's a better word, people get into this whole notion of Indianness. Are you really native enough? Have you asserted your identity? And who's defining what that is?
Indianer.
Yeah, I'm Indianer than you. And so you get into that sense. And what that creates is this sense of inclusion, exclusion, more exclusion than inclusion. So when asked about the Confederacy or the Haudenosaunee, oftentimes we get into this battle about, well, who's Haudenosaunee? And my comment that I offered on Facebook had to do with how dysfunctional the Confederacy has been for several generations now. And the ironic part is, it is more dysfunctional now than it was, say, 50 years ago. At many levels, and it's dysfunctional at a time when there are all these iconic people that people look up to, the Oren Lyonses and John Mohawks at the time, different people that people have praised about their knowledge and their wisdom. But it makes you question, then how did the Confederacy become so dysfunctional? And part of it gets down to the question over who controls that definition of Haudenosaunee.
We're even at a time now that we're just seeing how connected we all are.
Especially, electronically. The ability to travel to and from territory. We have never been as close, physically close, in so many ways as we are right now.
Yep.
And yet we still have people say, well, they're not really Haudenosaunee. So that's the exclusion thing that I want to talk about. And so when you've got a certain boys club running that's trying to call the shots and claiming that they are the Haudenosaunee, that somehow it is just a small circle of people. And then Matt, you and I, we sat in and listened to Oren Lyons at Hall Walls in Buffalo literally say that the only Haudenosaunee communities were Onondaga, Tuscarora, and Tonawanda. And in that room were a whole lot of Cattaraugus Senecas.
Yep.
And nobody spoke up. They didn't even seem offended by it. I was offended by it. And, of course, I'm Kahnawake Mohawk. So I guess
I think that was part of raising my question of, well, where do I fit in there then? How do I partake of that? And that helps drive my quest for information of how everything works. So, I wanted to be part of this and to make something work here.
But part of the question ends up being, is if the Confederacy is dysfunctional, does that mean the Haudenosaunee is dead? And this gets to the point that I made in my post, and I know you have something to add here, Ed, but let me just weigh in on this. There's an expression that we've heard, and in fact, it gets, people cite it almost as like it's terms of treaties and all that says, this shall be the way as long as the waters flow and the winds blow and the grass is green. But that, as long as the waters flow, that's the one that I wanted to concentrate on, because many have reinterpreted that, and oftentimes they don't even say waters, they say rivers. So as long as the rivers, and then I've heard people say, as long as the rivers flow south or flow downhill, and they've changed this whole notion because the concept, as long as the waters flow, sure, you can interpret that in terms of the creeks or the rivers or currents or tides, all kinds of stuff. But it also is about the flow of water from childbirth. Before any child exits the womb is this flow of water. So the way it was explained to me, that expression, as long as the waters flow, has to do with the continuing of life, the birth, childbirth, procreation, and the whole idea of children yet to come. It is the realization of those faces that we have yet to meet. So when we talk about as long as the waters flow, for me, as long as we have another generation coming, as long as we continue to produce children, even if we aren't the most functional, because, the way it was explained to me is, as long as we have one who claims to be Haudenosaunee and who understands certain aspects of what that means and is working on their identity and they identify themselves as Haudenosaunee. As long as there's just one, then it's still alive. And there's certainly more than one.
I heard 3.
Well,
Because you got to head to 3 sides. You can't be that by yourself.
well, but the whole point is, as long as there's one, then there's somebody to teach it to the next and to the next and the next. So as long as you have somebody who can teach, then you have somebody who can continue the idea of Confederacy and keep it alive. So, having said that, I think it's important that people realize that there are many of us who are striving for good. And I would say the people who are striving for good and to be helpful and to be, to I guess solidify our identity and fight for sovereignty. There are many of us that are striving for that. We have different ideas of what that means. We have all these ideas about what a warrior is and what a warrior isn't, and how to fight for sovereignty. What does that word "fight for sovereignty"? What does that expression mean? So, one of the things that that I think we have to understand is that none of us have solved the great mystery. We are all trying to make things better in some way. I'm not saying everybody's successful. Some people are not doing that. Some people are making things worse. But at the same time, I think rather than just criticizing each other because we don't like the path that somebody else is on, even though we all claim to be on the same path. Especially for those who are claiming that native identity. But we find ourselves being so consumed with this notion of exclusion and pushing people away. You're out of the circle. You're not Haudenosaunee. Your clan doesn't exist anymore, or you don't know the language, or you don't understand the concepts. I mean, we've gone through 3 years now of quote unquote great law recitals, where they have still failed in 3 years. They have failed to explain what is the process and the procedure for counseling. How do the clans meet? How does that whole process work? They've been consumed with the Peacemaker story and the Hiawatha story each one of those 3 years. Now, I'm not saying don't teach that and don't learn that and don't understand that, but the whole idea that we don't seem to be nailing down the particulars yet.
I think it's 5 years.
Have they been doing it for 5 years?
Yeah.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Wow, that's even worse.
That was one of the announcements that they made at the last Great Law was, okay, we've made it in 5 different territories now. Now they're looking to go to Tuscarora next.
Oh, actually, 5. I can remember 4 because there was Oneida, there was Onondaga, there was Akwesasne, and Tonawanda. What was the other one?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
But he said it was 5 anyway.
Yeah, well, maybe it is, but that's not what I'm disputing. What I'm disputing is, have we lifted the Confederacy out of its dysfunction in all this time? There's still some unsettled disputes that have not been resolved between Oneida and Onondaga over, over Fed rec and all kinds of other things, land claims, all kinds of stuff.
Back to what I was saying earlier is we've never been in a time where we've been so connected electronically and be able to communicate. So, why can't we come together to find a new way, a revamping of all of this? I mean, it's going to take a lot of work. Everybody's going to take input from everybody, but we got to adapt because there's so many different variables now. It's not like it was pre-Columbus or anything else. It's evolved and changed. We've evolved and changed.
But even if we think about that. Even if we wanted to use the most archaic and ancient procedures and protocols, to go forward, they still can all be bolstered by our ability to communicate, and we should be able to. We should be able to communicate from territory to territory in seconds, in milliseconds.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, that's what Ed was talking about. The 7 basic skills of communication, and I believe that's what really needs to be dusted off first before we can even get to that place. Right, Ed?
That's one of the things I was teaching the kids. I was doing teaching for your summer program. The participants were 5th and 6th graders, and that's what I was trying to share with them was those skills. and I think they need it around the world.
And those skills are?
The first one is listening. Learn how to listen. It's not just being quiet while someone speaks. It's actually paying attention so you can comprehend what they're addressing. So from that comes comprehension, and then patience, empathy, commitment. All these things basically are skills that we have to develop within ourselves.
Well, and I guess where I get a little frustrated is we oftentimes can get more consumed with tearing each other down than looking at where our common interests are, where we overlap, where there are common goals, and where we agree with each other. For the most part, we agree far more than we disagree, and I'm talking about the people. I mean, and even not just Ongwe, but even non-native people. We oftentimes have so much more in common and so much more of a common interest. But again, we tear each other down. And I'll give you an example. I mean, this past week, and in fact, I mentioned on Friday's show, I talked about suicide. We talked about just briefly about it. That Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park had committed suicide, and of course, when one of these rock stars or movie stars or comedians or celebrities commit suicide, there ends up being this whole litany of let's honor their lives, and is
that a martyrdom?
Well, I mean, whether they intended to be or not, it ends up happening because of media for the most part. But what happens is you get this reoccurring kind of conversation that all invariably is going to happen, where somebody's going to say, well, they struggled for a long time and now they're at peace. Well, that sounds good. I mean, so suicide's good? Or, they're in a happier place now. Well, that sounds good too. Or you'll hear say, oh yeah, now Chester Bennington can play with Elvis in heaven. And
if you follow church teachings, you can't go to the better place.
No, as far as Christian dogma goes, you go straight to hell if you kill yourself.
Yeah. So I mean, they're in a better place. You're not going to go unless
your grandma's in hell. You're not going to see grandma if you commit suicide.
Like
if you believe any of that stuff, right?
George Carlin, he says, well, they must be smiling, looking down on us right now. He said, nobody ever says they must be looking up, screaming at us.
Screaming in misery, right? But I mean, whether you believe all that stuff or not, the problem is we have created this false sense, this mythology about afterlife and about death being this peaceful place, even though follow the light. And let's face it, we don't know. I mean, I know that people have had near-death experience. Ed, you yourself has that. Yeah. But having a near-death experience is not the same thing as going all the way. So my point is, when we romanticize this notion of dying and the idea of resting in peace and that kind of stuff, I mean, that happier place is a pine box. I mean, that's what it is. And, so when I raised these issues and I said, look, I'm not going to be a part of the glorification and the romanticizing of suicide, I got some feedback, and not all of it was positive. I mean, look, there were some people who shared my sentiment about all this, and but what I was accused of was stigmatizing, creating this stigma of suicide on suicide survivors. And first, I had to sort out in my own mind what's a suicide survivor. I didn't know. Are you talking about somebody who survived an attempt at suicide or a family member who committed? I had to figure that all out. But look, I'm not condemning somebody who changed their mind. Or I am not a fan, because let me say this, and I know people are really afraid to talk about this. There are some people who attempt suicide who do it for the purpose of vindictiveness. They say, I'll show you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make you guys all regret, the way you treated me. So there's some of that. And some of those people do commit suicide. Some of them don't. So I think the idea of using suicide to inflict pain on each other, especially intentionally, is a terrible thing. But the reality is, whether you intend it or not, I referred to suicide as a selfish act. And man, there were people who were all over me. I had people posting up articles that say, "Oh, suicide is not selfish." Look, that moment that you slip the noose around your neck and kick out the stool, or pull the trigger, or take the pills, or roll the windows up on your car with the exhaust pipe in the window. I mean, when you do all that stuff, you at some point have disregarded your loved ones. And even if you suggest they're going to be better off without you, everybody knows that the survivor's guilt from a suicide. Oh, if I only knew, if they had reached out to me, if I had seen the signs. Everybody has to live with that stuff. And that's a terrible thing to have to live with. And that's what happens when somebody commits suicide. Invariably, somebody, either a family member, a child, a parent, a loved one, a friend, starts to blame themselves. And that's the part of that makes it a selfish act. But I'll tell you, I had some people attack me, and that's okay. I mean, I don't necessarily say these things to gain popularity. I want to have the conversation. But this is where I came back to was, I'm not suggesting that somebody who's trying to soften the blow of suicide for a family loved one is necessarily glorifying or romanticizing suicide. I think that's a slippery slope, because if you're going to tell a loved one that their parent or their family member who committed suicide is in a happier place, and that's what you see. You see it all over Facebook. So here's my question. If you're a 12-year-old struggling and even contemplating this notion of suicide, and then you see a hero of yours commit suicide, and then see all the praise heaped upon them, is that going to discourage you from doing it or encourage you to do it? So that was my point. So look, I'm not saying I got the suicide thing figured out, but you know what? Nobody does. It is an ever-increasing problem. So my point is, rather than somebody attacking me because I'm saying we need to condemn suicide and we need to take it off the table because they don't like the way that I did it. Look, the person who commits suicide, they don't need my compassion anymore. They're gone. The people who are the survivors may need it, but the last thing they need is somebody telling them that their loved one is in a happier place, because that's how you get intergenerational suicide. Because that's if dad is in a happier place and I'm struggling with all this stuff, why shouldn't I go to that happy place? I mean, that's the logical, that's the logical conclusion or deduction somebody can make. So, and I'm not saying that's the only way that people get there, but so I bring this up, and because this is kind of what I've been going back and forth on Facebook and other places talking about this, and I'm not saying that I got to figure it out. Like I said, I think whether we're talking about identity, fighting for sovereignty, fighting against environmental degradation, I don't know that anybody has the exact answer. When I hear somebody post that to be a warrior means to, what was the comment? What's the comment?
I gotta look it up now.
I mean, it's something about warriors don't fight, they pray.
The strongest warriors are
prayerful or whatever. Well, look, I'm not prayerful, and people can condemn me for that. I don't believe in prayer. I think it's a fallacy. Now, look, I'm not condemning people for doing it. I mean, by all means, if praying makes you feel better, if it brings you peace, if it does that stuff, it's kind of like meditation or introspection and contemplation. If prayer helps, by all means, but if you think you're going to pray for an answer for somebody else, or pray that the Dakota Access Pipeline's not going to happen, look, that's not going to stop it. What's that T-shirt we saw recently it says, I like science because, what was the comment? It said something about, praying isn't going to give you answers. And, and that was, it's a science on, it's a T-shirt I saw on the internet for sale. But
I'm learning the most powerful warriors don't fight, they pray.
Well,
and I had to rebut
then I don't know what their definition of. I mean, let's face it, the word war is in warrior. I mean, that's what I mean.
But the violence isn't the first place they go.
No, absolutely not. And that's not our word. When we the fact that word has been applied to Native people, British Skarhaget or the men, look, I don't shy away from the word warrior. I do have a problem when people equate being a soldier and being a warrior the same thing, because I think they are not the same thing. One is about responsibility, and one is about taking orders. But to suggest that a warrior doesn't fight is, and that they merely that praying is for holy men, I guess. I mean, and I'm not saying that everybody. Or that nobody should pray. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I don't. But I don't think it limits my ability to help a community.
In my reply to that statement there, I said that, fighting is not simply violence, because there's so many different aspects of what that oppression is against us. It might be trying to take our language, it might be trying to take our culture, it might be trying to, influence us one way or the other. So it's our responsibility to fight to keep the language, to fight to keep our ceremony.
And part of that fight is education.
Yeah.
And if what you're saying is just pray to the Creator, or pray to some
we keep our language. You can pray to
you can pray for all you want, but if you don't, even the Pope, I say this all the time. Even the Pope says, if you pray to end hunger, then start by feeding somebody. Mm-hmm. The first step is feeding somebody. It's that simple.
Self-preservation is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And I remember that one little story. Even a mouse, when cornered, will fight back against a bear. It doesn't care. It's trying to save itself.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and so I'm to suggest that we merely pray. Look, if people want to do that, that's fine, but don't. If you are that type that's gonna pray for answers and pray for solutions, don't condemn those of us who are physically promoting solutions and physically resisting oppression. Look, you can pray that oppression ends. And I'll tell you, we've got 500 years of praying. We, and in that 500 years, we've lost our land. We've lost much of our language. We've become increasingly assimilated. For even the idea of prayer is assimilation.
Yeah,
that's more of a Christian thing. I mean, I'm not even the way that we've turned what we call what was being called ceremony or festival or our those those Thanksgivings, that we've turned them into some sort of religious sacrament or religious ritual. That is even changed. I mean, these are supposed to be enjoyable occasions. When we do those Thanksgivings, they're supposed to be festive. They're not supposed to be somber, rigid, painful, rituals, religious sacraments you're going through. Look, we're at the bottom of the hour. Let's go ahead and we'll take a break with a song here, and we'll come back. But I want to talk more about this, because I think this is part of what we have to sort out, and we'll talk about it when we come back.
I see Murray's listening, so I'm going to play a song.
All right, you got to play Murray.
Talk to somebody, let them know. Talk to your friends and let your feelings show. Even if it feels like there's nobody, don't let go. Sometimes it feels like the walls are closing in. Sometimes it feels like that.
All right. Thanks for coming back. This is Let's Talk Native. I want to first off give a shout out to our sponsors, Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, good friends of the show, like Ed Schindler here, Tracy Brown, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and others who have made contributions and donations, I guess, to the show to help us pay the bills and help us not only do this, but even assist me in doing my show in New York with travels and stuff. I want to thank all of those who not only support the program today, but who have supported in the past, because we're in our 8th year, and that support has enabled us to educate, entertain, and inform for the last 7 years, and like I said, now into our 8th year. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming, and I want to thank CKWE for both our simulcast and rebroadcast, as well as providing us with a phone number to tap into to callers. I want to thank Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying the Let's Talk Native. And I also want to thank all of you who share the program. And I see some of you are sharing it. Not only are you sharing the Facebook live stream, but you're sharing the audio that we post up on SoundCloud. You're sharing the videos that we're posting on our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. And I thank all of you for doing that, because I think that is the way the word gets spread. This show is not a heavy-hitting show keying in on a specific issue. Today we decided we're going to have a more general conversation about the path forward and how we battle certain things. And the thing that keeps coming to mind is this notion of exclusion. Because even when people talk about suicide is a very lonely, desperate act. Part of what leads to that desperation is that sense of loneliness and the sense of of just really not having anybody giving them compassion or attention, or or like they have no worth. And I'll tell you, we've seen this notion of exclusion so much being applied. The whole notion of enrollment, tribal enrollment, not just disenrollment, just the whole idea that I'm a member of the Seneca Nation of Indians or the Potawatomi Band of such and such, or whatever. This notion that we are either in or you're out. That whole idea of exclusion, that is not our culture. Our culture says we are a culture of inclusion. That's the whole white roots of peace and all of that. So the idea that we have adopted this, and I don't even just call it racism, but this discrimination about who is Indian, or to use her expression earlier. I mean, that's part of the problem.
That's what I was trying to say. How come I don't have no volume? I was saying that that because we have this ability to adapt, we should there should be ways to allow for all of that, for people that aren't, to bring people in, I guess, more.
Yeah.
Because we have so many different avenues now of understandings and beliefs in it, but we still gotta be able to come together.
Right.
So we got to make adjustments for that, I think.
Well, and I'm not talking about homogenization. I'm not saying that we have to.
They have your own place.
Well, and even this notion of diversity and tolerance and everything else. Like I'm not against that, but I'm also not suggesting that we don't need to clearly establish some parameters for who we are, because I think the failure to do so, and I guess this is where I want to talk about the fact that we battle each other, because we're so busy pointing a finger at somebody and saying, well, are you worthy? Are you in or are you out? Are you Haudenosaunee, or are you I mean the whole notion of whether or somebody else being able to make the judgment call on who is and who isn't, and whose identity is and isn't. The whole idea is that we have to go forward with this with a better understanding of getting to moving forward from where we're at. Now, I know we're not all in the same place. I mean, there are some people who are I think have a much greater understanding of what fighting for sovereignty is. I mean, some of these guys who embrace FedRec and band councils and everything else, they think they're on a better path. They think they are on a more pragmatic path towards some sort of identity. The question is, when you weigh it all out, I mean, how do you bring those people and say, look, let me show you how it's not? I don't want to just toss you away necessarily. I think at some point you've got to find the like-minded people to work with, though.
That's what I'm saying. We got to be able to come together and hash those differences out.
Yeah,
you gotta talk about it. You can't just work on assumptions and.
Yeah, I mean, I look at some of the way that we scrutinize each other, and it's kind of rough. Go ahead, Ed.
I was going to say there's an aspect that we all have to be aware of, and that is that we have to learn how to communicate and listen and do commitment and all that stuff, but we have to start with ourselves. You can't do that first and foremost with everyone around you. You first have to do that with yourself. You have to get to know yourself. You have to understand yourself. And you then, from that, as you get to know yourself, you can share that with other people and learn how to not only share with yourself, learn to share with other people. Okay? And when I talk about sharing, I mean you're not going there to judge anyone. You're going there to basically communicate. And that is the purpose. Because there may be ideas out there that, hey, I hadn't thought of that yet.
And that's the whole notion of gathering minds. The whole
gathering minds.
Is that we're going to have more strength with more participation by sharing.
One of the things I learned when I was in South Dakota was this medicine man. He helped share with a group of us who were there, and he helped explain that this moment right now is the dawn of our future. Okay? That meant that what happened before no longer was there unless we wanted it to be there. And that was the basic premise of what he explained was throughout life, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Mm-hmm. A person can suffer if they wish, no problem, because we've all got things we can think about to suffer through again. But that's one of the things that you need to do in order to find a way around any concept of self-destruction, okay? And you mentioned prayer. I like to think. Okay, wherever it was.
You just did a reply to that.
The thing that I found very interesting was meditation, talking to oneself.
Yeah.
Okay, and then coming to the understanding, because a lot of people will ask me, "Why do you say good morning? It's 8 o'clock in the evening," and I tell them, "This moment right now is the dawn of our future." That's why I always say good morning.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a caller.
Helps.
All right, let's go ahead and take a call. Who we got? Degarundige?
Degarundige.
All right. Hey, Paul, is that you? Hello.
No, it's Degarundige.
Oh, is that? It's not you. It's you.
I told you.
You called me the other day and said you were going to call back. I sat by the phone patiently for 4 days now.
That's good. It just means that you're waiting. You're finally tuning in to what I have to say.
So what's going on? What's new?
Yeah. A lot of same stuff, spend a lot of time trying to get people to understand things, and that, and, tonight I'm listening again to the radio and what you guys are talking about. I wanted to address that. One of the first things you talked about was as long as the grass grows, the sun shines, and the water flows. Because it is as long as the water flows. Because we're talking about people giving their word, and that when we made agreements with anyone, and later on we started making agreements with non-natives, the Europeans when they got here. Because people should understand that there were always agreements being made between peoples before the arrival of Columbus. So when the white man got here, he had this idea about making a treaty with us and so on, and he always wanted to play the great white father or the great white mother or the uncle or whatever. And a lot of people said, no, it can't be that way. It has to be done where, we always look for equality. And so they told him, no, we need to be as brothers and as equals and so on and so forth. And so they said, well, who's the witness going to be? And right away the Europeans said, well, maybe, like the British would say, well, maybe we got France. The Americans would say, maybe we got France or Germany or somebody. And our people said, no, because the thing is, men have the ability to lie. They said, we don't need somebody who's going to tell us lies. And we're not going to take that risk because the future generations depend upon all of this stuff and people keeping their word. And so I said, well, who would that witness be? And they said, creation.
Yeah.
Creation will be the witness. And so that was what was accepted. And they said, well, how will we know? How will we know this? And our people says, as long as the grass is growing, as long as the sun is shining and the water is flowing, this agreement will stand. And the white man tried to change it to as long as the rivers flow. But our people said, no, it's got to be as long as the water flows. Because before a child is born, a woman's water will break and the child will be born. So what our people are saying is that as long as our children are being born, we will honor our word. And creation will be the witness to all of this. And when our women no longer have children, when their water no longer breaks, then there will be no one left to uphold our end of the agreement. And so, because this was the way we did things, even we do that today, when we put together what we call Dionegorha, our wampums, we put our words in there. And that wampum symbolizes our strength to protect our word, because our word is so sensitive, and that it is only us who can protect our word and to uphold our word and never to bring shame to our children. And so this is, when we talk about these things, our people really need to start to learn what our history is, and stop going by the fairy tale books that the white man has written about who we are and what we're supposed to be about. And again, we have to go back to language, because another thing you're talking about is one taking their life. And in our language, when we talk about that, we don't talk about it negatively, but what we say in the language, what our ancestors have concluded is that we say, when someone does that, we say, it's like he has cut away, he has cut that which will protect him, because we call Otnegura the brain. And so we say Onegura. What he translates to is that which will protect us, will look out for us, and so when we cut away that connection of what takes care of us, that self-preservation and that which is all in the natural instincts and everything that's in that mind, when we cut away from that, then we say and ona wahadaderia, and now he has killed himself. And so this is what our language tells us, and this is why I keep saying all the time, we need to go back to our language to understand our people, and why we say things the way we do. And so, because one of the reasons a person, they say they cut themselves off and everything else, because they have reached a point that they no longer want to take responsibility for life. They no longer want to have to deal with any of these things. So what they basically do is that they abandon the responsibility of life, and that they've ignored that part of their protection which helps them to preserve themselves, because we have a responsibility to our children, our grandchildren. It is a responsibility that was given to us to creation. And we must uphold that. No matter how hard anything is, we have to stand by our children and our grandchildren, because we cannot be so selfish as to deny them. And that because many people, young people, are taking their lives.
But I mean, a lot of that, though. I mean,
they're never going to be born.
There's a lot of the problems that exist, and you know, and at the same time that this rock star committed suicide, in that same week, two children in Ontario did, you know, on Native territories, and so the point, I think, being is that we have reached a place where the level of despair that we've allowed to overrun our territories, and I say we because we all have some responsibility to those children. It's not just our own children as a possession, like you always say. We have a responsibility to all those children, and not to let them mire in that depression or despair. We should understand that yes, they have a responsibility, but they also should know that they have worth and they have value, and that they have something to contribute. I think part of empowering our young people, instead of just saying no, we live in this welfare mentality that the Indian Act and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is imposed on our territories. I think this is part of that change. And so when I hear people talk about, you know, well, we've just got to be more sensitive to suicide, you know, to the notion of suicide, and I say no. I think we need to be more sensitive to the living, not to the ones who are not living. And I think this is where I get frustrated, because I see there being a bit of a disconnect between confronting this notion of killing yourself versus empowering those people who are suffering with this level of desperation. Go ahead, Ed.
I think that we have to pay attention to not just the living. There's also ones, and it's referred to in Senegal, the Gatnigondeños. And what it refers to is it takes your mind away, whether it's drinking or drugs, whether it's
depression.
Yeah, depression. Basically, what it is saying is you're not carrying out basically life, okay? And therefore you need help. And that's what the responsibility is of the community, to help place you back on the path, to remind you, okay? But it's going to be your choice. It's not going to be someone else's choice that you do that. It's going to be their opportunity to help you to make that choice. But it's going to be up to the individual.
Yeah, because they got you. And which means that the mind has been changed, that the mind is not functioning the way it's supposed to function. It's been changed. So rather than the mind living to be for what's good and not only beneficial for you, but for your, you know, for your people, your children, and so on and so forth. And so this is what, when we're talking about the Gatnigondeño, how your mind has changed. They're not saying that someone's changed your mind, but that you have changed your mind for whatever the reasons are. You know, but the thing is, what I'm always trying to express to the people is that, look, there are a lot of these problems, and we know what it stems from, because it was never a part of our culture, as we can remember, where we would, you know, abandon life. You know, the thing is, we all know that someday we're going to move on, and that our time on this earth will be done. But the thing is that you know, while we're here, we have to live for the living, and we have to live for the future generations. So today we have a lot of problems. We have all these kids, and you know, and like you guys were saying earlier, is that, you know, we're saying, oh, this person's gone to a better place. You know, if somebody was suffering from cancer and so on and so forth, and then you want to comfort the minds of the family, then that's the proper thing to say to them, is that, you know, they've gone to a better place. Because I know when my brother died, and I was feeling really bad about it. And my grandmother come up to me, says it's better now for him because he doesn't have to suffer anymore. So those words from her made me feel better that I knew he wasn't suffering anymore. I mean, he was just a 15-year-old boy, died of cancer, and and the pain he went through. So the thing is, yes, that comforted me, and the thing is, that's our responsibility to help to comfort people in their time of need. It doesn't have to be just about death. It could just be about the hard times people are going through, and we talk about how we're critical about each other for political reasons, but we've become very, very cruel to one another. We're always trying to find a negative about who we are and so on. And, everybody will go around boasting and tattooing themselves and waving flags and wearing jackets and everything about how good they are and everything. And the thing is, they'll all talk about how they attend the ceremonies and so on. And I have to question, what the hell did you learn while you were there? Mm-hmm. And now, what did they teach you while you were there? And a lot of them don't know. They say, well, I go there because I enjoy the music and I enjoy being with the people and that. But they don't really learn anything.
They'll take it as some sort of religious sacrament that they have somehow fulfilled. Yes, check the box.
And that's right. And the thing is that these ceremonies have absolutely nothing to do with religion. And I think a lot more young people would understand that if these guys who are doing the ceremonies and so on, and that, if they would translate for these kids, I say kids all the time, but it's for people, there are older people that don't speak our language as well. But it's for their benefit. The thing is, these ceremonies are for the people. It's to remind the people. It's to encourage the people. It's to teach the people, young and old. And that's what it is, to be grateful for what we have. And our criticism of each other is so terrible, especially when the first ceremony talks against that. It's the Adunwa. And this is why the speaker goes to the four corners of the house at the beginning of the ceremony. And he acknowledges every single person for the contribution that they've given the past year. And when they're going to close that day of ceremony, they go around again. And this time encouraging the people to work harder, to try harder, so things will be good for everybody. So it's for everybody. They don't focus on anything that you did was stupid or foolish or ugly or anything. They encourage you about the good. And they ask you to look in the good of everybody. Some people give 365 days of their lives to help work for the people. There's other people that give a little bit of time, but that little time was better than nothing. That little time still had an impact in one way, shape, or form. So we should never be looking so much at the negative, because growing up, my grandfather used to say to us all the time, he says, people are funny. When we look at ourselves, he says, we have the eyes of a mouse, little eyes. But when we look at other people, we got eyes like a cow, big, buggy eyes we're looking at, but we're not looking at each other equally. And that's why I always tell people, in the morning, when you get up and you look in a mirror, if you wash your face in the morning, and is looking at yourself, just look at yourself and your reflection and ask yourself, do I like that guy? Do I like that girl? Do I like that woman? Whatever reflection you see, do you like that reflection you're seeing in the mirror? And the thing is, our people always said, you can always try to cheat and lie to the people, but you can never lie to creation. And so the thing is, if you and that reflection are the only two in the room, you can't lie. Because creation is with you all the time. And you cannot fool creation. Mm-hmm. That's why creation was smart enough to put inside you a thing called a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, everybody wants to talk about, all these things. Again, you mentioned about these so-called great law recitals, and I say so-called because all that's been done was telling children stories. And the thing is, that story, the peacemaker's journey, is exactly what it is. It's a story. But they're trying to tell the story like this was a recorded documented history. No. It was a story that was created to tell to the children, and it was a part of their education so that they could start to decipher reality from fantasy. And the thing is that there was a lot of symbolic language in there, and it was up to them to figure out the symbolism, and that because even the characters in the story are exactly that. They're characters. Because when you talk about Adodako, and it's not a man, it's a responsibility. When you talk about Ayuwata, it's not a man, it's a responsibility. Tegarihogo, Onowireto, Satagariwate. All of these title names are a responsibility. They're not men. Because first off, the title is the family's. That's what the family's responsibility is. Adodako, he doesn't have like what they call a clan mother, okay? And the reason for that is because it's not a family title; it's a confederacy title.
Dago, we're running out of time.
And all of okay, but this is if they want to teach the people the great law, then do the great law. Then we wouldn't have the problems we have because now the people would know what their responsibility is. Yeah. Because everybody talks about what's my right, what's my right. Never mind what your right is. What's your responsibility?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'll let you guys go.
Yahweh for calling.
All right.
All right, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. That's Dago Rundage, our good friend, and somebody that I rely heavily on for counsel. So again, appreciate the call. Hey, look, I will be in New York this week, so and on Thursday morning from 10 till noon, check out Let's Talk with John Kane on WBAI. You can go to www.wbai.org. If you're not in New York City, you can listen to it anywhere just by going to the website. If you're in New York City, you can go to 99.5 on the FM dial. We are in fundraising mode in New York. I'll be talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. That'll be a book that I'm offering as part of fundraising, as well as trying to do some matching funds and raise money for WBAI, a station that is struggling financially, and that's the reason we have to do these fund drives. And so Shawnee Rice and myself, we will be live for 2 hours on WBAI on Thursday morning, so please join us. We're going to stream the show on Facebook live there as well, and so we'll look for your comments on Facebook. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank Dago for calling in. Thank you, Matt and Ed, and look for the reposting of this video by Jake Proud, and the posting of the video of this show on our YouTube channel, and that's Let's Talk Native TV. Look for that channel on YouTube. Yahweh.
Yahweh.